Praise the Lord and welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are stepping right into a story that has literally shaped literature, history, and theology for millennia. I mean, it is the ultimate call to adventure. We're unpacking the narrative found in Exodus chapter 3. You know, picture this. Think of a time you were just going about your normal, everyday routine, minding your own business, and boom, suddenly you're hit with this massive, life-altering realization or calling, right? That is exactly what we are looking at today. So let's just dive right into the ultimate reluctant leader's story and see how a completely normal shepherd's day turned into a moment that literally changed the world.
To really get to the heart of this encounter, we are looking directly at the English Standard Version. We aren't just skimming the surface here, guys. We're going to pay close attention to the specific wording and honestly some fascinating footnotes to uncover the immense depth hiding behind this famous calling.
So the scene opens with Moses keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. He leads them over to Horeb, which is identified here as the mountain of God. And it's just a perfect example of how the extraordinary completely interrupts the ordinary. Moses sees a bush burning with fire, but miraculously, it's not burning up. When he turns aside to check it out, God actually calls to him out of the bush. And notice the very first command given: take your sandals off your feet. To use a simple, everyday analogy, think about walking into a pristine, highly controlled environment, like, say, a high-tech laboratory or a sacred cultural heritage site. You take off your street shoes because you're stepping into a space that requires immense respect. You're leaving the dirt of the outside world outside, which brings us to our first real, actionable step for daily application. Pay attention to the holy ground moments in your own life. When you encounter something truly awe-inspiring or profoundly important, just pause, show respect, take a breath, and be fully present.
Now, once Moses is fully paying attention, God reveals his purpose. He says, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters." See, God isn't distant here. He is intimately, deeply aware of their suffering. And the response to this trauma is a massive promise of rescue. He promises to bring them out of Egypt to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. In real-world terms, just imagine an impoverished, oppressed group of people being promised not just an escape route, but a total relocation to the most fertile, prosperous, and expansive real estate imaginable. It is a complete 180-degree reversal of their horrific reality.
God then looks at Moses and says, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh." And how does Moses react? Absolute, total doubt. He immediately goes, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" It's the classic reluctant hero dynamic, right? We have all been there. This is a textbook case of imposter syndrome. Moses is basically saying, look, I'm just a shepherd out here. I am in no way qualified for a massive international rescue mission. But listen to the divine reassurance, "But I will be with you." Notice how God doesn't list Moses' qualifications or give him some hyped-up pep talk about his hidden leadership potential. No, the answer to Moses' feelings of inadequacy is simply the promise of divine presence. And that gives us our second actionable step for today. When you're facing your own imposter syndrome or a task that feels way too big for you, shift your focus. Stop asking, "Who am I to do this?" and start relying on the strength of your support system. Remember that you absolutely do not have to face massive hurdles completely alone.
Well, Moses is still kind of looking for a way out here, or at the very least, he needs more information. So he pivots. He throws out a second objection. He asks, "If I come to the people of Israel and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" He knows for a fact that if he goes back to his people claiming this massive divine mandate, they are going to demand credentials. They are going to want to know exactly who is sending him. And honestly, this sets us up for an incredibly fascinating deep dive into the linguistic and theological meat of the text.
God's response is easily one of the most famous declarations in human history. "I am who I am." And he tells Moses to say, "I am has sent me to you." Now, if we look closer at our source text's footnotes, this is where things get truly wild. The text notes that the word Lord, when it's spelled with all capital letters, actually stands for the divine name YHWH. And this name is intricately, deeply connected with the Hebrew verb hayah, which literally means to be. The footnote even points out that an alternate translation is, "I am what I am," or "I will be what I will be." Guys, this isn't just a standard name like John or David. This is a profound declaration of self-existence, eternal presence, and absolute reality. It's like God is saying, my defining characteristic is that I absolutely fundamentally exist.
Following that mind-bending revelation, God establishes a permanent legacy. He declares, "This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations." So this specific revelation wasn't just for Moses in that isolated, overwhelming moment out there at the burning bush. No, it was meant to be the foundational, eternal memorial for the entire nation of Israel. It was this powerful anchor point of identity that they were supposed to hold on to, generation after generation, so they'd always remember exactly who was leading them out of the darkness.
But here's the thing. The promise isn't just theological. It is intensely geographical and highly political. God instructs Moses to gather the elders and reiterate the promise of that land flowing with milk and honey. But there is a massive catch. This land is currently the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Talk about a crowded neighborhood. This brilliantly illustrates the sheer scope of what is being proposed. I mean, it's one thing to promise someone a vacant lot, right? It's an entirely different story to promise them a territory that's currently inhabited by 6 different established groups. It really highlights the seemingly impossible political and physical obstacles standing right between Moses, the Israelites, and their promised freedom.
So, how in the world do you tackle a seemingly impossible obstacle? You need a plan. And the text lays out a highly strategic, multi-step roadmap. Step 1. Go and gather the elders of Israel. Moses has to build consensus and get leadership buy-in first. Step 2. Together with those elders, go confront the king of Egypt, asking for a 3-day journey into the wilderness to sacrifice. Step 3 involves divine intervention, where God will stretch out his hand and strike Egypt with wonders. And finally, Step 4 introduces a truly surprising twist, plundering the Egyptians right as they leave. And there is a brilliant real-world strategy here, giving us our 3rd actionable step for the day. When you are facing a monumental, seemingly impossible goal, you absolutely have to break it down into a clear sequential strategy. Don't just rush the final boss. Gather your allies, make your initial requests, anticipate the resistance, and plan for the aftermath.
But notice the immense tension introduced right here. God tells Moses exactly what the immediate outcome of that first diplomatic step is going to be. He says, "But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand." God is managing Moses' expectations right out of the gate. He's letting him know, straight up, that the initial request will absolutely fail. Now, if we look back at the footnotes from our source document again, there's a super fascinating textual detail. The ESV footnote points out that while the main text says "unless compelled by a mighty hand," an alternate reading from the Hebrew, which is actually supported by the Septuagint and Vulgate, translates it as "go not by a mighty hand." This powerfully, perfectly highlights the fierce impending struggle of wills between divine power and the pure stubbornness of human authority.
And this brings us to a very, very surprising conclusion to this whole prophetic strategy. God promises that he will give the Israelites favor in the sight of the Egyptians. He says, "When you go, you shall not go empty." Instead, the Israelite women are literally instructed to ask their neighbors for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing to put on their sons and daughters. The text just bluntly calls it out, "So you shall plunder the Egyptians." As a real-world example, think of this like a massive, long-overdue severance package or back pay for generations of uncompensated oppressive labor. They are not escaping in the dead of night as destitute refugees. No, the plan is for them to walk out wealthy, carrying the riches of the very empire that enslaved them.
And that brings us to the end of our analysis of Exodus 3, leaving us on a massive cliffhanger. We've seen the awe-inspiring burning bush. Moses has received his commission. He's been given the eternal, unpronounceable divine name, and he has his 4-step strategic plan. But the ultimate question remains, doesn't it? Will the king of Egypt truly let the people go without the compulsion of a mighty hand? The stage is absolutely set for a historic confrontation. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you enjoyed this explainer and want to see how this incredible narrative unfolds, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.